Good day, good day. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, J.L. Edwards. I'm gonna hit you with a quick bullet point. So, what I got for you today, right now, on this September 15th, 2020, in the year of our Lord, about 6:30 Mountain Time, is an interview, well, a 5-minute clip from an interview that Steve Pieczenic did on 9/11/2020 on the Alex Jones Show, where we spoke about how these politicians basically have met their best buy date, you know what I mean? Their expiration date is up, and how they really have become obsolete, and it's more evident within how they're handling this, say, pandemic from state to state. We see that blue cities are doing certain things that a lot of red cities aren't, and you don't want to believe that they politicize a pandemic, but he says some interesting things. So I'll go ahead and play this clip, and like I said, it's about 5 minutes, and when it's done, I'll break it down a little more.
We are back live. Ted Nugent bringing us in. All right, Steve Pieczenic, StevePieczenic.com. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us all this time. In the 4 or 5 minutes we have left, I mean, the question I was getting into is, I guess, a little esoteric, but who is in command of the left? Why do they go out of their way to destroy themselves? I don't get self-destruction at that level. And what do you expect them to do in this election? And what should we be watching for in closing?
Basically, you've got nobody in command of this left. What's happening is basically a conglomerate of ineffectual people who had an ideology that once was vibrant for them. But you have a Soros who's funding some things, the Hillary Clintons. They're just names. At this particular point in time, you're not going to have a Democratic Party. As far as I'm concerned, the Republican Party is gone. The party that really is in power is called Trump. And he will appoint those people he needs in order to affect change. The notion of ideological parties at the time of the social media is antiquated. What's relevant now are little pieces of information that comes across at different times on the internet, social media. Most people are getting addicted to it. But in reality, the parties are really antiquated. You don't need a House of Representatives. You don't need a Senate. Those are just welfare victims. What you do need are the governors, and Abbott is important. DeSantis in Florida is exceedingly important because he can do whatever he wants and he can defy the principles of the federal government. The federal government is already breaking up in terms of a cyber nation. The two ends of the East and the West and the South are really non-functional anymore. The cities are empty. So what you have is a new era where a businessman is coming in. He will create peace in different areas of the world. Bahrain will be the next one in terms of a peace treaty, then Oman, and then Saudi Arabia. Then I predict he will have a treaty with Iran and China and North Korea. So what will happen is we expand and peacefully, externally, internally, we'll be imploding pretty much around the Democratic cities and the major cities that are controlled by Democrats. Why? It has to do with the fact that most of them are pretty ineffectual in terms of creating a business or running anything. Cuomo has never run a business. Cuomo's mother is a lovely person whom I know, but both sons are totally dysfunctional. They can talk, they create process, but nothing else. So when you're in the business of process, unlike you and I, where we have a product, you have a product, you have vitamins, you have a content, I have content. That's different from the people who are in the process business, which is politics. Politics will no longer supersede the ongoing relationships that we have in terms of moments of truth, what they will call the alternative truth, i.e. the Alex Jones or the Steve, whatever his name is, Pieczenic, and you will have a social media where—
And by the way, this is not wishful thinking. You got to come back again soon, because you said all this on the show 18 years ago, and I thought you were being too big and optimistic. They've made themselves obsolete, and so everybody ran from the East to the West. They made the West the East. Now they're running to the middle to get away from themselves, and these systems are literally making themselves obsolete and then trying to bully all us into submission, but only destroying themselves faster. It's an incredible process.
Well, it was predictable, and that process really had the final punch, which was coronavirus. Was that incidental or coincidental? I don't have to get into it, but it was not.
But they inflict the biggest lockdowns on themselves to control us, only destroying themselves.
Correct. And that's what happened. We eventually went into self-destruction, which is the final moment of 9/11, where we self-destruct.
Cutting the nose off despite the face. Amazing. Dr. Steve Pieczenic, thank you so much.
Welcome back. Yeah, so there's a few things that I wanted to highlight out of that clip. And one of those was, so if you notice, he said that like the structures of the House of Representatives or your local politicians, they're inadequate. Like what do they do? What do they do for you? And something that came to mind is, what has your representative done for you lately? Now that's not to say that there isn't good politicians out there, or that there's not those that do have your best interests in mind. But when you look overall, locally and federally, we vote for these people, we give them our power, and now we see that power that we give them is misused. You know, they mandate this, ban that, say you can't go to the park, but these are the same tax dollars that help build this park that I've been paying for, and now you're telling me I'm restricted from taking my kids there, even so much further to where, you know, they're arresting people. And when you look at what's going down there in Australia, you know, people getting arrested in their home for posting social media posts, people getting dragged out of their car. We got to know that this is a global tyranny. This is a UN takeover, you know, assisted by the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. Now, someone may say, well, how do you have that evidence? Well, stay tuned. This is just a quick bullet point, but something that Steve Pieczenic, whether you love him or hate him, well, you know, check his record. He's been very accurate on InfoWars many times over. Nevertheless, he's a, you know, ex-CIA, quote, ex. So the accuracy of what he's saying has checked out. But what is he saying? Trump is going to make peace. These parties are obsolete. They don't make a difference anymore. They're not relevant to you and I and the relationships that we can have internationally by way of the internet, or the reach that we can have nationally as a people who want something better. He's saying peace over there in Israel, in the Middle East, peace with Bahrain, you know, Israel, or, you know, just all of these individuals where a businessman is brokering honesty and trust and saying, hey, I'm not going to screw you over like the administrations of the past. You know, those governments and foreign entities have been burnt too by our administrations with their self-interest, by these same politicians that don't have your best interests in mind, by these same representatives that we elect to represent us, but then we find out that they're representing the United Nations. I mean, on record and off record, we have intelligence agencies that are breaking our laws, you know, that basically have rendered the U.S. Constitution and the United States Code obsolete, not in effect. And you have these officers of these high law enforcement, whether it be DOJ, FBI, all these entities within the government, that it's like, what do you do? What do you do? All this money goes to you, but what do you do? So Pieczenic is absolutely right when he's saying, honestly, you can probably represent yourself better than any politician can ever represent yourself. You know, so we need to really localize our power again. Remember what the United States, you know, really stood for, and understand we can't have a United States if the people itself won't be united. We see in these blue cities, red cities, it really doesn't matter. All of these things going on with these movements and peaceful protesters. But what does it boil down to? It boils down of a love for hatred, you know, and we forgot that I don't need an organization to tell me who I am. I don't need this group to tell me what my real identity is. If you ask me personally, it started when you took God out of the schools, when you took prayer out of the schools, when God wasn't a priority in people's lives. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that a nation that's, how should I say it? What's the word say? A nation whose God is the Lord is blessed. You know what I mean? And what does that mean? That means, well, look at what they're ushering in now. Something very contrary to what this nation was founded on. So if they have a UN slogan in our candidate for president, you know, running in the race, Joe Biden, has a slogan said "Build Back Better," we have to understand that something has to get torn down in order for something to be built back better in its place. So stay safe out there. Peace and blessings. Do some research, but ask yourself, what has your representative done for you lately? And if there is that gap, why don't you run for office? Why don't you be the change that you want to see? I mean, I know it sounds corny, but see, if we just sit back and complain about these things and about how corrupt and bad politicians are, well, why don't you be the representative, represent your community to the best of its ability and bring forth that real change, a change that's built off of truth, not built off of lies. Stay safe.